Kagurabachi Chapter 18, the end of the first arc. We made it. So let's just get straight into it, but as always, check the playlist if you want to start from Chapter 1. Chapter 18 is titled Roar, and we pick up right where we left off with Chihiro delivering this devastating blow against Sojo that cuts through Cloud Gouger. Sojo is lying on his back, bleeding out, thinking to himself, he broke Cloud Gouger. That was a lethal blow. The narrator then reminds us of a moment earlier in the fight where Sojo cloaked himself with twice the amount of spirit energy that his body would allow, ignoring what would happen to him after the battle because he did that, because he was trying to take out Chihiro at all costs. So we then pick back up with Sojo, who is thinking, I'm paying the price. My entire being hurts far more than any lethal wound. Chihiro's not looking great either and actually coughs up a bunch of blood, and Sojo says, it looks like you paid a heavy price as well. I thought I was throwing all my chips in. At the end, I used the dregs of my spirit power to summon Mei for a counterattack, but I never imagined that you'd destroy Cloud Gouger. I guess the enchanted blades really have chosen you. And Chihiro just looks at him and says, no, that's not true. They chose you too. But we then jump forward in time what appears to be a couple of minutes, and we see Chihiro collapse, but Shiba teleports in and catches him, just like he did at the end of Chihiro and Sojo's first fight in the city. So this is a nice little callback, and Char is still on top of his shoulders, and he says, gotcha. He then thinks to himself, the enchanted blade. You did well, Chihiro. And then we get this panel of a person appearing at the entrance of the estate with what looks to be like some sort of suitcase or bag, or maybe like a dog. I don't know. It doesn't really look like a living thing, so I'm gonna go suitcase. But yeah, they just appear and Shiba senses this. But as soon as he turns around, there's absolutely nothing there anymore. Chihiro then looks up and sees Sojo climbing the stairs to try and get back into his estate, and there is a massive trail of blood on the staircase as he does this, and he says, Sojo. And Shiba says, with his guts hanging out like that, he'll be lucky to last a few minutes. We have the info we need, and he's hardly in a state to be tortured anyway, so should I finish him off? And then we quickly cut to Sojo, who is trying to climb these stairs with all of his might, and he's just like grunting and moaning. And Chihiro looks at him and says, no, I don't think that's necessary. Char then hops off Shiba's shoulders and says, Chihiro, let me see your right arm. I'll fix it like before. And Chihiro says, I don't want you touching this. And she says, it's okay, I'm used to it. And she says, come on, hurry. And then he lets her take his arm, and she closes her eyes and starts to concentrate. We then cut to inside Sojo's estate, where we see that he's made it all the way to his laboratory, leaving a bloody trail in his wake. And he's thinking to himself, they destroyed everything, but I don't need any equipment. I understand the enchanted blades now. I can control it now. And as he says that, he grabs on to the Datenseki. As he clutches it, he thinks to himself, I must muster my last bit of spirit power. Before I die, I can stand equal to him. But things start to go very wrong as his body cannot contain this power. And Sojo thinks, what's missing? What's the problem? And he calls back to Chihiro's words, who said, the enchanted blades chose you too. But we then cut back to Chihiro and Char, and she has been unable to heal his arm, and she's very confused by this. She says, wait, what? And Shiba says, well, you can't expect to master it right away. And Char says, I'm sorry. And she gets really down and starts thinking about like these painful memories of being a failure. And Chihiro says, don't be silly. I won because you healed me earlier. It's all thanks to your power. We then cut back to Sojo, and the Datenseki is now starting to explode, and the entire lab is starting to go up, and he again thinks back to what Chihiro said. They chose you too, but you will never stand as an equal to my father. And for that, I'll cut you down. Sojo's last words are him screaming Roku Hira as he explodes, the lab explodes, and the entire estate explodes. And we can see that Shiba teleports the whole gang out right as this happens. We then jump to 10 days later at the Kamunabi headquarters, where it's reported that in the abandoned castle in southwestern Chiba, Jinichi Sojo's body has been identified. And as we have a bunch of new characters here, you guys know the drill. It's time for a bunch of nicknames. So, first and foremost, we've got Boss Man because he's in the middle, so I'm going to assume he's the boss. Then, of course, we've got the Drip King Azumi himself. Here is Patches, Feitan 2.0, Pigtails, Giraffe, Wolverine, Hairpins, and Leprechaun. Bossman then continues and says, of the anti-Cloud Gouger Special Forces, Shiyumi Harima, Hajime Kugara, Kiyohiko Uzuki, and Makoto Kashihara have perished in the line of duty. Azumi then adds that Kazane Machi lost his right arm from the shoulder down, and Ikuto Hagiwara is alive but lost both of his legs. He remains unconscious. Feitan 2.0 then says, regarding the true Sanuchi blade submitted to the Rakuzaichi, the item is still slated for auction, but now with a different seller listed. And Pigtails says, so Sojo wasn't the real leader. Giraffe says, but we didn't lose Kaichi. It's good that we kept those two in reserve before the auction. And Wolverine says, we need to recover the Shinuchi at all costs. Hagiwara and the others have made a huge contribution. Hairpins then says, the issue is who to choose for the next lifelong contract with Cloud Gouger. And Leprechaun says, wait, we did recover Cloud Gouger, right? The narrator then says, a lifelong contract, a limiting mechanism built into all of Rokuhira's blades. Once someone takes possession of an enchanted blade, they are the only one that can use it. So ever since the previous owner of Cloud Gouger was killed at the time of Rokuhira's murder, all of the wielders of the enchanted blades during the Imperial War have been under the Kamunabi's protection. And we get this panel of 5 different individuals, and I guess maybe this one is imprisoned or something? The narrator then continues and says, as long as their lives are protected, those enchanted blades can't be used. In other words, Cloud Gouger was the only real threat to the Kamunabi. However, we then cut back to the Kamunabi where Bossman says, unfortunately, we must now address the real issue, Kazane Machi's report. We then cut to Ichigo in a hospital room as he is telling someone a bunch of information. He says, Hagiwara's troop didn't kill Sojo. It was somebody called Chihiro Rokuhira, and he claims to be Kunishige Rokuhira's son, and he possesses a 7th enchanted blade that we have not heard of. We then cut back to Bossman who says, we searched the grounds of the estate but didn't find Cloud Gouger. We believe Chihiro Rokuhira must have taken it. And Pigtails says, what? This is an even bigger problem. We see Azumi kind of zoning out in this Kamunabi meeting, and he flashes back to a memory of meeting with Kazane in the hospital. He walks in the room and says, I understand that Chihiro avenged their deaths. And Kazane doesn't say anything at first, he just kind of sits there, but then ultimately looks at Azumi and says, the real problem is that these enchanted blades even exist. I'm sorry, Azumi, I won't reveal your relationship to Chihiro, but I can't condone allowing an enchanted blade to go unchecked. Azumi snaps out of this when Wolverine calls his name. He says, Azumi, and I quote, there have been multiple reports of a 7th enchanted sword, and we still have no information on this son. End quote. You knew the truth behind all of this, don't you? In fact, the whole reason the enchanted blade got nabbed was because you were secretly harboring Rokuhira's son. Isn't that right? Feitan 2.0 says he was harboring him because people like you were trying to. Enough, the boss man says. That whole argument was beaten to death 3 years ago when Rokuhira was killed. At that time, we decided to do everything in our power to retrieve those enchanted blades. He then looks at Azumi and says, that's why this is a big problem if you knew. So while internal investigations are going on, what we need to do is find Chihiro Rokuhira and retrieve Cloud Gouger and the 7th blade. Now that we know Hagiwara's troop was outgunned, we can't hold back against the threat of 2 enchanted blades. There's only one individual who can combat a sacred blade. We'll send the Kamunabi's strongest fighter. We then transition to a new scene where we see this character sitting down. Someone approaches them and says, Hayuki, they're calling for you, and you've been granted permission to use Flame Bone up to the torso. And that's where the chapter ends. So this is the strongest member of the Kamunabi, huh? Cool little tease to set up the next arc. I guess the Kamunabi are going to be hunting, probably isn't the right word, but they're coming after Chihiro. So that should be interesting. Can our boy please get like at least a 2-day rest though before this person shows up? Is it Hiyuki or Hayuki? Hyuki? Y'all let me know. But yeah, flame bone up to the torso? Like, are they really that strong where they have to be limited on how much power they can use? I mean, they must be crazy if they're throwing this person up against 2 enchanted blades. So excited to see where this goes. This fight was incredible. Very happy with it. Very happy with Sojo's conclusion, but I don't know if it is his conclusion. Like, such an interesting villain. I wonder if he really is truly gone, especially considering that weird moment that we got where Shiba noticed somebody at the gate, but then they disappeared. Like, who was that person, right? And so, where there's a weird mystery like that and a supposed villain death, I'm wondering, like, could that person maybe have somehow saved Sojo? But there's a few things that point against this. One, the Kamunabi claimed they found the remains, right? But considering Bro was like literally exploding, I'm assuming they couldn't have found like an entire intact body. They probably just found like a tooth or something and were like, yep, he was here. So I don't know. I feel like he could still be around. But again, he was like literally exploding. So unless that person was like an S tier doctor sorcerer that showed up, I don't know what's going on. But again, just their mere existence and that moment of Shiba noticing somebody, like that is something. So if it's not related to Sojo secretly being saved, I'm trying to think of what other shoe could drop from that. There were actually a lot of new characters introduced in this chapter, but that makes sense for setting up the next arc. Obviously, we have all of the Kamunabi, whom I gave nicknames already, but I'm more interested in these 5, the wielders of the enchanted blades. I can't wait to find out more about them, and in particular, this one. I don't know if this is like a prison, quote unquote. We do have like these seals here, so it makes me wonder if he's like being kept in this area. Like maybe these 4 are trusted enough to still be roaming around, but maybe this guy is like a war criminal or something. And in any case, I just want to find out more. And then we also did find out that only 2 of our Kamunabi elite force survived Sojo, and that was our boy Ichigo and Glasses, aka Kazane and Ikuto. It's gonna be hard to transition to people's real names after getting used to the nicknames for so long. But yeah, devastating. At least 2 of them survived, I guess, but one boy's missing an arm here. Ikuto is missing both of his legs, so like they're definitely worse for the wear. I'm very interested to see where their stories go, if these are characters we even keep in touch with, or if, this is kind of the last we'll see of them. And finally, before I give my general thoughts on this arc, I just want to give a big shout out to Ozzy, who sent in some support and said that next arc is even better than this one. So that's got me really hype. All right, so arc 1 in the books. What did I think? And for those of you that have been watching this entire series, this is going to come as no surprise because I've said it all along the way, but I think this is peak. It has been so much fun. The art is incredible, the action is incredible, but on top of that, it's really had that depth that's kept me intrigued. The character work and especially the emotional depth has been there, and that's what really excites me for a series like this. You guys know I'm all about the nuance. I love the artwork and I love the hype fights and the aura moments just as much as the next guy, but it really needs that depth to like keep me coming back and wanting more. And so far it's got its hooks in me. So I'm really excited to dive into this next arc. Now, speaking of arc 2, what's going to be the plan moving forward? And unfortunately, I think I'm going to stop doing the chapter by chapter coverage, and I know that's going to disappoint a lot of you, and I am so sorry. Like, it truly does hurt me because I know that a lot of you really enjoy this, and I do too. Like, do not get me wrong, I'm having a lot of fun with this. Again, perfect world, I'd love to keep doing this every day for the next 2 months until we're all caught up, but it's just such a colossal time investment that I have not had time to do a lot of other things that I need to be doing. And in order for me to abandon all of those other responsibilities, these have not been performing well enough to make that make sense. And it's not all about the metrics and stuff, but when it reaches a certain point, I just have to do what's best for, like, ultimately the channel and me and all that jazz, right? So from here on out, I am going to probably catch up on the entire next arc very quickly, and then I will release like a recap and my thoughts on that arc. So for those of you that just like do not like to read manga, I will still catch you up. It just won't be the in-depth panel by panel, dialogue by dialogue version that we have been doing. And so then the goal is to hopefully be caught up relatively soon, and then I will do chapter by chapter again, but at the current place in the manga. So we'll be doing like one of those a week, which is a much more sustainable rate than every single day. So again, I know that's very disappointing to a lot of you, and again, I really am sorry, because I would love nothing more than to continue and get to do this chapter by chapter with everyone at the same time. But anyways, y'all, that's going to do it for this one. That's going to do it for Arc 1 of Kagurabachi. And to everyone who's been on this journey with me, let me hand you the proverbial sandwich as a thank you for joining me. And for those of you that hadn't read Kagurabachi before this, I hope this Arc 1 experience has inspired you to pick up the manga and come along with us to the current state of Kagurabachi, where we can continue this journey. But thanks, y'all.